I mean, we could have a whole riff on never stop exploring, because I do honestly joke about never stop exploring all the time. And like with J-Star the other day at the Crag, I was like joking about never stop exploring.
What do you mean?
Well, I just joke that if I ever stop exploring, I'll get fired. Like I love going to new places, doing new things, trying new ways, like, you know, even like small scale exploration within your backyard, you know, even like trying a new trail to the Crag, things like that. Just like I see that all as exploration. And I do think that after 20 years of consistently joking about how I should always be exploring, I think it has made me more of an explorer. You know, it's like you fake it till you make it. It's like I just keep saying, don't stop exploring. And then eventually you're like, you know what? I think I am kind of an explorer.
Yeah. I mean, I know what I love about like that sort of like curiosity, but like what works for you?
Yeah, I mean, I think curiosity is exactly the word. I mean, I think that the idea never stop exploring gives you permission to ask questions about the world, to try new things nonstop, to like always be pushing in interesting ways. I just think that that's the best way to interact with the world. If you want to start your exploration, go to thenorthface.com.
That would be so funny if you like send in your resignation. I'm done exploring. Like,
well, dude, eventually I'll get too tired. I'm gonna post something on social, be like, after 25 good years, I'm tired of exploring. Now I'm just gonna sit on my sofa and watch Netflix.
Somehow I don't see that happening.
I think with guiding, you know, like my job is to make accessible the mountains. And I've always tried to do it in a way that doesn't bring the mountain down to the person, but brings the person up to the mountain.
Alex, I have a funny question. We've talked about it in the past a little bit. Like there is something about high altitude mountaineering and like the 7 summits and it's like even different than hardcore alpinism in a way, but it's just like everything is cranked up a notch.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, and I think it's maybe important to draw a distinction between high altitude mountaineering and alpinism.
Yeah.
Because I think that with high altitude mountaineering, the big expeditions that cost a lot, that require sponsors or just big money to get into, you wind up with like Wall Street dudes who are just trying to tick something to basically to be able to boast to their buddies that they did something rad. And I think that's subtly different than alpinism, where people are just getting worked on their own little adventure, going, you know, alpine style in the big mountains. But no, I mean, high altitude mountaineering, and particularly the 7 summits and sort of like the most popular big peaks in the world, are just there's just so much money in them. You know, it's like, I don't want to say it's a circus, but there's just a lot of people, a lot of everything, a lot of support, you know, big challenges. I mean, because the thing is, there's still big mountains, and then there's like accidents, there's danger. And it's like you have people who have never put crampons on before trying to climb some of the biggest mountains on earth. And you're just like, there's just a lot that can happen. You know, it's just like, it's a spectacle for sure.
Mm-hmm. A lot of drama.
Yeah, it's like a big arena. Yeah, high altitude mountaineering, you're like, what a scene.
Today we sit down with a climber who's lived it all, Melissa Arnot Reid.
Melissa is the first American woman to successfully summit Mount Everest without oxygen. She also climbed it 6 times, which is a lot. She co-founded the Juniper Fund to help Sherpa families that are impacted by the loss of family members in the mountains. And in general, she's just spent a lot of time in the biggest mountains on Earth. She's also one of the rare, very successful high-altitude guides. I mean, I think that's what sets Melissa apart, is that she's made an entire career as a guide as opposed to a professional climber.
Yeah, and there's very few people doing that, and there's even fewer women.
Melissa sort of blurs the line between professional climber and guide, but she's basically been working in the mountains for her entire career, which is hard work. Like, that is a challenge.
And she's had a lot of successes, but through it all, Melissa's personal life reflected the highs and lows that are associated with those big mountains. This year, she published Enough, Climbing Towards True Self on Everest. It's a deeply honest, unflinching portrait of her life and her path to reach the heights of high-altitude royalty and the long, hard road to find love and belonging.
We get to sit down and talk to her about that path, the state of Himalayan mountaineering, and the last great first that remains on Everest.
Hey everyone, just a quick note. Today's conversation touches on topics like self-harm and suicidal ideation.
I'm Alex Honnold.
I'm Fitz Cahall.
This is Climbing Gold.
I am Melissa Arnot Reid, and I am a mountain guide. I'm a mother. I'm a new author. I just have a book out, and I am a professional Tetris player, which is like making all of those work together while running a nonprofit and trying to keep some semblance of sanity.
Oh, I thought you were going to say Tetris is in shuffling duffel bags around for big mountain expeditions.
Kind of, yeah. But honestly, that's far easier because a duffel bag is a fixed amount of space to work in, and your schedule is somewhat like malleable and infinite. So I wish it was a duffel bag. That would be easier.
When you list it like that, it does sound tremendous right now. You have a lot going on. How are you balancing being a mom, having a new book, touring, and then, I mean, still working as a guy? Are you working right now?
Yeah, I am. Yeah, I've never, since I was 12, never not worked. It's crazy. I mean, you probably feel this on some level with just parenting and work and like being an athlete. You know, we are lucky enough to do for our job the thing that we love. And so that comes with a certain amount of intrinsic guilt, I think, as a parent, because you have to constantly be like, am I working or am I just pursuing joy? And I think there's a lot of value in pursuing joy. So in brief, I don't balance it. It's like I always imagine that I have 20 glasses on the table and I just try to make sure there's like at least one drop of water in each glass, but like very rarely is any of those glasses ever going to be completely full.
Yeah, nothing's running over right now. Nothing's overfull. Classic. How do you introduce yourself? You just say professional mountain guide or you know, high altitude mountaineer, cutting edge mountaineer? Like what
Alex, I don't know if cutting edge is like
okay, maybe
what
not
I would
cutting
call
edge,
it.
but
Yeah, I'm a professional climber and athlete, like in a different genre of climbing, of course, than your particular area. But I don't usually introduce myself unless prompted with Everest, because Everest has been a place I visit and a huge place of growth for me and a place where I've achieved a lot, but it is just an accomplishment. It's not really an identity for me. My identity comes a lot more from like actually working as a mountain guide, being a professional teacher in so many ways. I love that. But yeah, I've been really lucky. I have had probably one of the more enduring careers on Everest for a female guide. You know, it's 2025 this year, and there's 0 female guides working on Everest this year, which is a little bit of an exception because there's usually at least one. But this season,
because it's usually you.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't gone back for almost the last 8 years. I haven't been back there for a variety of reasons. But yeah, I mean, Carla Perez is usually there, Lydia Brady, but you know, there's just not a lot of us. So it's really wonderful. I spent 10 years consecutively of my life working on Everest and dedicating myself to trying to learn as much as I could about that particular really like niche-y specific type of atmosphere and guiding and just the place and the challenge that I was pursuing. A lot of people expected if I wrote a book, it would be this book about Everest and like my time on Everest and sort of uncovering that and, you know, my personal goals, trying to climb without oxygen and then achieving that. And that really is such a tiny part of my personal journey. And I felt really committed to telling a truer, to me, much more important story, which is, and I don't know if you can relate to this. I imagine that you can, Alex, but when we're pursuing things that are really big and really challenging and haven't been done, there's often like a lot of interiority that's important to you, where the people on the outside see your accomplishment and they see this destination, this goal, and it seems like that's what you're working towards. But for me, that was never true. I was actually working on something else completely.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm like, oh, you're so healthy and well adjusted after the years of effort in the book. I'm sort of like, I don't know. Have I ever thought about that? I'm like, I'm not sure that I.
It's okay. Also, you know, I joke like you don't have to have some like demons that you're carrying and dragons you're trying to slay to accomplish big things. I'm assuming you do get this idea that like if you're pursuing something that's really challenging, that the consequences could be death, which I mean, in so many ways, that's life. That's what we do. People assume that you have some irrational relationship with death or consequences and risk. And, you know, it's so much different when it's happening for you. Like it's not always about something else, but I think for a lot of people, like there's a lot different context of what's going on for you personally within trying to pursue some external achievement or goal.
So what was going on for you? What dragons were you slaying?
Yeah, so I grew up with a really intense question about my own belonging. I had a family circumstance that led me to question if I could achieve my way into being loved or if I could contort myself into being enough. And when I discovered, you know, alpinism and climbing and mountaineering, it was this foil that was really allowed me to have a very tangible, concrete sense of achievement. And it was
Hmm.
very black and white. Like you get to the summit, that's success. You don't die, that's success. You climb higher, that's success. The first time I summited a peak, like went peak bagging or hiked up something with any technicality to it at all, I was 19 years old. And I really loved the athleticness required for being in the mountains and this idea that like you were accountable for yourself. I started out realizing that I needed to get more experience and that I needed to sort of find a way to break in. So I decided to like get a baseline level of medical expertise so that I could be an asset to other climbers, so I could con people into taking me climbing because I had something to offer. Because I didn't have, gas money. I didn't have like a car. I could like coil a rope really fast, and that was all I could offer. So I started developing that skill set, and I didn't know about guiding as a career until I got into wilderness medicine first, and my instructors, both of them, were actually guides on Rainier, and that's what opened this idea of like, you can go get experience climbing while guiding clients. And so you can start out with like a relative lack of experience if you have something else to bring to the table. And so what I decided to bring was medical expertise. But I wanted to also become a guide quickly so that I could finance climbing, because climbing is expensive, and I came from like nothing and had no money and was counting the calories between like a ramen packet and like a Totino's pizza to decide like which way I was going to spend my money. But guiding opened this opportunity to be able to go to the mountains, travel, be paid, and get to like continue to refine this craft. And so I dedicated myself to like the tactical skills of learning the rescue skills, learning as much of like the technique and the climbing as I could, and continuously refining that. And then, got a job as essentially like an apprentice guide. And then I quickly got to start working internationally. And I thought somehow that I could achieve my way into self-acceptance, and that I could replace this interior question of like, am I good and am I good enough with external accolades? And it was a pretty poisonous journey, honestly, for me. And I met you in the middle of that journey at like a really insidious time for me when things were quite dark and really challenging. And, I
I, I
was.
I wanted to ask. I was like, did we meet? Yeah. When was that? When did we meet?
So we met in May of 2014, and it was
Okay.
right after the icefall accident in the Khumbu icefall where 16 local workers were killed.
Hmm.
This devastating accident happened, and it was in a string of traumas that I'd been experiencing. And then that day that we met, I don't know if you remember this, but a guided group on Rainier was killed in an avalanche that morning. And one of the people who was killed in that avalanche was somebody who I had mentored and brought to work on Rainier. Aside from just like all the other interior shit that I was working through, I had these like really big moments that had just happened that were causing me to either confront some of what was going on internally for me or keep running away from it. And if you read the book, you find out like I kept running away from it for quite a while.
But not forever, and that's the beauty
Not
of the book.
forever. Yeah, you can't outrun yourself, turns out. She shows up everywhere you are.
Yeah. We'll be back with more after the break. It's nice to see somebody achieve greatness, in their way or whatever, in a healthy place, because there's such a sort of cultural cliche around the tortured artist, who like needs to be angstful and whatever. And I feel like my wife and I went through that quite a lot with my whole process with El Cap and everything. She consistently pushed, well, can't you just be happy while you climb hard? Do you have to be all angstful to do things? And ultimately, I was just kind of like, I guess I don't need to be like dark about it. I can just have fun and do the same things. It's like, why not just be happy while you do it?
Yeah, I mean, I used to joke when people would ask me like what makes a good high altitude mountaineer. I would always say like a deep sense of self-hatred. I went to Everest as a guide in 2008. I was 23 years old. I'd been working as a mountain guide for 3 years. I got invited to be an assistant guide with a single client, and it was what started my career. And for many guides in that era, getting to go and climb Everest, get to the summit, that would sort of be that check mark. You'd continue on. But for me, it opened a question. Like I had a lot of questions. I was curious why there were no other women working there. I was curious about my own limits. I was curious about how hard it felt versus, if I tried to do it without oxygen. But if I'm very honest, I also deeply wanted to prove that I belonged. I didn't want people to say, she's only guiding on Everest with this client because she's young and cute and the client clearly is interested in her. She's only getting sponsorship because she is this sort of outlier of the mold of what a mountaineer looks like. And I wanted to prove like, no, I have the skills, I have the ability, I can do this thing in the hardest way possible that will not allow you to doubt me. And I thought, and then I go on this really long journey of trying. And of course, like, thank God I didn't succeed right away because I would be an atrocious person to talk to had I. Like, I would have missed the whole point of life, I think, in many ways.
Or you would have found it on K2 or found it elsewhere. You would have just kept grinding because you would have just found that surprisingly that success didn't settle all your demons. And you'd be like, oh, I have to keep searching elsewhere.
I mean, I believed that if I achieved this thing, then I could love myself. And the truth was, as you said, I had to actually get to a place of hugely, the first step, self-forgiveness. And then this would be possible. For me, it would not have been possible had I not gone on that sort of beginning of my healing journey. And I was at the very beginning of just reorienting my entire view of myself and life and taking accountability for the people I had hurt, looking clearly at the places where I had been hurt and starting to treat them with some kindness and forgiveness. And that's what allowed me to be able to do this really hard thing, because I didn't realize how much I was carrying by trying to prove my way into being accepted, which is just something you cannot do. And I know if anybody listening has ever tried to like prove their way into belonging, you just know how well that works. It just doesn't work at all.
I mean, I think that's what's so powerful in the book. It's like, it takes you, I don't want to say a long time, but it takes you a while to work through a lot of things. But then ultimately you do. And it's so great when you finally get to freaking send.
Yeah. And when I was getting ready to sort of put the book in the world, I was talking with my editor and he was saying, like, what questions do you think will remain for people when they read this book? And I was like, I bet you the number one Googled question after people read my book is going to be like, is she still married? Because I go through such a like atrocious journey of self-destructive relationships, and like they're gonna be like, oh, that was 5 years ago that the book ends. There's no way she's still married, right?
And so are you still married?
Yeah, I am. Yeah, I am
how
still
old's
married.
How old's your kid?
So I have a 7-year-old daughter and I have a two-year-old son. Yeah.
Okay. And so at the end of the book, you have your daughter.
My daughter's just been born. Yep.
Yeah. Okay.
At the end of the book. Yeah.
Oh, wow. I'm like 7. Geez. Like, how long were you working on the book? Or when did that come out?
Yeah, I wrote the book in like 2 or 3 months at the beginning of COVID, basically.
Oh, wow.
And then I sort of sat on it for a while because, as you know, because you've read it, it's like searingly exposing and reflective, in many ways like healingly honest, but also like terrifyingly honest for me, because I sort of disrobe myself of all of the illusions that I spent my whole career putting on myself, of trying to be one person and show the world that I was this one particular person. And then that's not who I was. I was somebody who was really struggling, and I reveal all that. So I sat with it without doing anything with it for like a year and a half. And then I sold it to the publisher, and you know how publishing works. They kind of have like a queue. Yeah, it takes a long time. If I had my way, I would have like written the book and published it the week it was done and given it to the world and kind of like gone through that whole like angsty anticipation process in a really truncated way. But I think that the truth is I needed to continue going on this healing journey. I was still pretty new into this new way of living and seeing myself in my life. And even being able to get honest enough with myself to be able to write the words in the first place was a whole other thing. And then knowing that the words were on paper and that other people would read them, it was honestly torturous because you don't know how it's going to be received. And I realized about a year before it came out, I'm spending an irrational amount of brain space torturing myself about my family of origin, so my parents specifically, and what this is going to do to this very fragile and fractured relationship that we already have. And so I luckily got back into a really good therapist and started just kind of like
You started pre-gaming.
I pre-gamed. I was, and she said something to me at like 6 months into that journey where she said, that the book is just your way of forcing yourself to have these conversations that you would kick the can down the road forever. And I was like, that's the truth. It's an inevitability I would try to avoid forever if I could, because discomfort like that is really hard to face. All of those relationships, all of those tough conversations that the book has prompted in my life, I forced myself to have them. I gave myself this accountability that I couldn't avoid. And I'm now glad for the amount of time it took, because it gave me a beat to take a deep breath, remind myself what matters and sort of like continue to be settled into this life where it isn't feeling so fragile.
I mean, would you take it back? Like, how much would you do over if you could?
I have regrets about my actions in life at different eras, my low character choices at different times, but I don't have shame. I think that that's the thing that I was able to liberate myself from is we all have done things that we would prefer nobody to ever know about. We've all had moments where we're like, ugh, could have been a better person there, or could have done that differently. And for most of us, we don't feel compelled to like put it in a book and share it with the world. But I do, because my image was really controlled by both myself and like the brands I was working with, and put out there with this sort of like nice shiny glow of achievement. But like there's so much more to it. Like there's so much struggle. There's so much, shitty things that were happening behind the scenes that I was causing harm to people, that I was making choices to get ahead that I'm not proud of. And so I don't feel comfortable when you just clap for me in this room for accomplishing something, because I want to give you context. And I have a lens of compassion for both, for others and myself. And I wanted to tell people my story of what things I have experienced. And I wanted to put it all out there, and I wanted to name names. And I knew if I was going to do that, I needed to name my name as well.
One of the things that I took from the book and just listening to you talking about your experiences as a professional guide is that I feel like the world of high altitude mountaineering and guiding in particular just feels bigger in a way than the climbing world. Like as a professional rock climber, I'm like, tomorrow I'm going to go try to send my sport project, and I'm going to go with my wife, and it'll probably be just the two of us, or actually one other guy might be at the cliff tomorrow. But basically there'll be like 3 people at the wall. We'll like try our hardest, whether we succeed or fail, nobody cares. There's no spotlight. Like, but I'm like, the high altitude mountaineering world just feels so much bigger. It's like huge money, crazy clients, people dying, all like the accidents, like basically everything is turned up to 11. There's like tragedy and there's triumph, and then people are celebrated as like national heroes. I mean, can you talk a little bit about how or why the high altitude world feels so big? And I asked because a couple years ago, I had a slight bee in my bonnet that I was like, maybe I'll try like high altitude mountaineering a bit, or like do some walking uphill. And so, Topo, Esteban Mena, the two of us went and climbed Mount Vincent together, and then we're going to Aconcagua as like a little 7 summitsy, like, little adventure. We climbed Vincent and did this new route. I mean, just walked up this other part of the thing. And then we went to Aconcagua, and the most fun part in Aconcagua was bouldering at base camp. And we went to like Camp 2 maybe, and then I was like, Topo, I don't care, let's go home. And so I went home and I went back to rock climbing, and that was the end of my high altitude mountaineering journey. Mostly because I was just like, I just don't get it. And I was struck by a lot of things because I was a commercial client. I'd hired a friend to like guide me on this mountain, which was great for me because it meant I didn't have to do any logistics, didn't do any permitting, like didn't care about anything, just went for a vacation with my friend. And we went climbing and it was fun. But I was really struck by all the other people that I met on the journey, because all the other clients had basically never climbed before. It's like everybody else who's there to climb the mountain, they're like, oh yeah, I went climbing twice. I climbed Rainier and I climbed Shasta. And I'm like, wait, what? You're like, man, everybody on these mountains has like never put on a harness, like never used an ascender, never tied a knot. I mean, I shouldn't joke about crampons because I barely know how to use them either, but still, I'm like, I kind of know how to use them. And I was just like, does this feel like climbing? Let me just be clear that, I mean, I think I'm into guiding. I mean, I'm into taking people to mountains. I think the mountains can be incredible teachers and like learning opportunities. But for some reason, the really expensive guiding, like on the really big mountains, just feels totally different than taking somebody up Rainier.
Well, I have really complicated feelings about it, I think, obviously, because as a guide, like I'm a great enabler of all of that. And I think like what you're underpinning here is this idea that like you respect that climbing is essentially an individual pursuit. It's an activity. It's more closely aligned with like coloring than it is with tennis in terms of like activity or sport, right? Like it's just a thing you're doing because you like to do it. And so how you do it should only matter insofar as you're not harming yourself or anyone else. And I think that's where this like ethical conundrum starts to exist, right? Where it's like, well, if we're going to actually just objectively look at this, the way that you can be a mountaineer without harming yourself or others is impossible, right? Because there's certain objective hazards in the mountains. There's certain things you cannot avoid. But then when you go down to that next tier, it's to gain experience. And a lot of people in the process of gaining that experience will determine that it's not for them. Like it's a leisure activity. It's really like coloring. It's just something they do very occasionally for fun and not like a vocation that they're willing to dedicate a tremendous amount of time to a craft of getting to know it really well. And I take it really personally because especially like I have a bee in my bonnet about being an atypical container of a mountaineer. Like I like to, when I do public speaking, like have people close their eyes and like imagine a high altitude mountaineer. Imagine somebody who climbed Everest.
They imagine a frozen beard and like
they're like
the
he's
whole...
6 feet tall. Imagine I imagine
exactly.
their hands, what they look like, and then I'll have them open their eyes. I'm like, that's me. And I know that I have been sort of like disqualified by people just based on that of like she's not whatever enough. And I always had tried to counteract that by gaining as much experience as I could. Well, not everybody does that. Not everybody chooses that path. They choose a different way to interact with it. Mountaineering is this thing where there's like a set of quantifiable objectives that we all agree are the mountains, right? The climbable by your average person who can walk uphill slowly.
This is the whole weird thing, though, is because without modern guiding, like Everest would be a very challenging mountain if there weren't freaking aluminum ladders strapped to all the parts that are hazardous.
Yeah, I mean, like... aluminum ladders. And honestly, like if you want to, I hesitate to say this because I think it's so exclusionary and I'm a person who shouldn't have the right to exclude anybody from doing anything. But, my husband brought up, if you banned oxygen on 8,000 meter peaks, like you would fix all the problems that society has with like, overcrowding and inexperience, because you would just raise this barometer of challenge to what it actually is. And so I think with guiding, like my job is to make accessible the mountains. And I've always tried to do it in a way that doesn't bring the mountain down to the person, but brings the person up to the mountain. Because even if you climb like Everest, for example, in the easiest way possible, it's still pretty hard. And every time we like make an accommodation to make it easier, all we're doing is saying you are a greater potential burden on the community. And I am the community. Like I'm the person who has had to deal with really the terrible outcomes of things going wrong. It's not theoretical to me. Like I've had to deal with bodies in the high mountains. I have a nonprofit where I deal with the families of high altitude workers who are killed while working. And if you think you understand like the consequences of risk, join me. Come sit with me with those families, because you just don't understand it until you really see it up close that way. So it's changed what I'm willing to do for a summit or for helping somebody else get a summit. It just doesn't feel right to me. But it's also like a really young industry, I think. Like the industry of commercial high altitude guiding is really only like 25 years old. And so there's all of these growing pains. And then you add into that 25 years, like the rise of social media and the lack of self-consciousness around a look at me sort of culture and society that we're building. And I think that combination of like a finite, achievable set of things that you can check off, guiding and supplements and adaptations that make these very high altitude, truly dangerous mountains super accessible to the average person, you get this crazy swirl that is what it is now. And I said at the beginning, like I haven't gone back to Everest since 2016, and there's a variety of reasons for that. But one of them is there's been this like really rapid shift in climbing the 8,000 meter peaks for many really nuanced and complicated reasons. And I am not currently in a place where I feel like I want to be part of that in the way of climbing it or helping facilitate others climbing it right now. My work is to support local workers through training and then support when accidents happen. That seems like my best use of my experience and knowledge of the area right now. Could that change in the future? For sure. But it has not felt right to me.
I mean, in the 10 years since you've climbed Everest, what's changed so dramatically that it feels like it's not worth going back for you?
Yeah, I'll just preface this with like, there's no amount of the word nuance that I could ever say repeatally that would offer how much actual nuance there is to it.
But just give us the juicy gossip anyway. We'll edit out all the nuance anyhow.
Just get some clickbait in this.
Yeah, exactly.
I think that it's a combination of things. But, as the rise of social media and people seeing other people that they viewed as like amateurs or non-athletes climbing these high peaks and made it accessible to them, the rapid rise of like adaptation guiding, which is like what you're referencing with the use of a lot more oxygen. And then during COVID, particularly in Nepal, where the industry that was commercial guiding on Everest was like really dominated by foreign operators. And something shifted. It was a slow shift coming, but it accelerated really rapidly around COVID. And you got this huge change in the makeup of local operators, so Nepali run operations with professional guides and, Nepalis who book the clients, everything else, and foreign operators. And over the 10 years since I was there, that has been like almost a complete flip of the percentage of climbers who are climbing with like local Nepali operators. And there's a million reasons for that, and it's not good or bad, but it has changed things hugely. It's not all equal. So there's going to be local operators that are incredibly diligent. They're hiring certified guides, and their interest lies primarily with the safety of the clients and preserving the mountain experience. And then there's going to be operators that their primary objective is income. This is like an enormous asset to their country, and it should benefit them, and they're going to capitalize that any possible way they can. I don't believe that for Everest or the 8,000 meter peaks to be safely guided, they have to be guided by foreign operations. I don't believe that at all. There's a number of local operators that I think far exceed any foreign operators in their safety records, in how they manage clients, in what the preservation of the experience in the mountain is. But that's not true of everyone, And so you just get a hugely mixed bag. And I think you did as well. Like when it was mostly foreign operators, you had kind of the same thing, but it was a little bit harder pre-social media to be able to like advertise your business and have clients find you. You didn't have very many fly-by-night foreign operators that had like one or two Everest clients, because it was so cost prohibitive to get those clients and get them to Everest and pay for your foreign guides and your clients and all that stuff. And it's just not as prohibitive for local guides to be able to like pop up a business and run an operation with less experience. And again, I'm just saying there's like a tremendous amount of local operators that do a really, really good job. And I believe the distribution of wealth from guiding the 8,000 meter peak should live in the communities where those peaks are. I really do.
Totally.
But I'm also super interested in seeing it be sustainable. And right now it doesn't feel like it is sustainable. And I don't think that's because of local operators, but I think that that's part of this really complex problem. But the thing is that I do find interesting is that when you get into that high dollar guiding, you're being exposed to people who are truly interacting with the mountains in the most minimal way possible. And most of them, thankfully, will never face the consequences of what life is like in the mountains when things go wrong. And so I think it's like a self-perpetuating snowball in so many ways.
That's what I thought was so crazy is everyone's like, oh, I'm climbing Mount Vincent is my third mountain ever. And then I'm going to Everest in the spring. And you're like, wait, what? You're climbing the highest mountain in the world and it'll be like the fourth time you've ever gone climbing, and I just found it so crazy because I'm like literally every rest day for the last 30 years, I like go for a hike outside and I like climb some mountain. And they're not big and they're not technical, but it's like you're just in the mountains all the time. Like I can't even imagine being able to count the number of times I've gone climbing on one hand. You know what I mean? Like some of the clients, you're like, oh yeah, those 2 times that I went and did a thing. And you're like, you're trying to take on the biggest mountains in the world with like literally zero experience. Like it's crazy.
No, and I used to try to quantify it for people. I would say when they'd say like, what do you think you need experience-wise to climb Everest? And I would try to like find an answer that was succinct, and I never could quite get there because they'd always counter it with like, bro dude, whoever, like never climbed anything else but the 7 summits and he summited. And it's like, okay. So I went to saying like, you should not even consider climbing Everest unless you have had 100 days in crampons that you can count.
I think I personally might be at under 100 days in crampons, but I do feel like
you're not on Everest, Alex. That's the thing, though.
That's true.
The thing, so I prefer to surround myself with people who respect the craft, like the actual craft of being in the mountains. And we've made the mountains so comfortable, and I'm a person who like pursues discomfort for fun, but I really think like the more comfortable we make it, the less special it is. And so I live in this little like weird bubble of trying to encourage people to experience it fully and be a connoisseur of the craft.
Yeah, but when you really experience it fully, it's heinous. It's like strong winds, no oxygen, freezing cold, chapped lips, no food. You're just like...
If there was like Big Brother style chronicling of these expeditions and you saw what that person who's worn crampons 3 times looks like climbing to the summit, instead of just seeing their like highly chosen and procured summit photo, and you saw like the absolute drudgery that they put guides and others in to like achieve this thing, and then quickly forget about it when they tell the story about the climb, like that's nothing to be that proud of in my book. I'm lucky enough in my career that I can be discerning. Let's just say that. Because like I have the privilege of being able to decline clients. I'm not guiding on Rainier and showing up with random people who, I just have to tie myself to whether I choose to or not. Like I'm very discerning and I try to make the barrier to entry such that the people that are going to come climbing with me are going to share this like personal ethic that I have, and it's going to be an enjoyable experience. And we are going to go and have this experience in the mountains that's going to touch this resilience center of us. It's going to cause us to be uncomfortable and not be able to solve it and find out like what the value of that is in life. Not get to the summit and take a photo and put it on Instagram and have all your friends and family clap for you. That can be part of it too, but that's such a short-lived joy. That is like absolutely a sugar high. And like everything else is the nourishment. Like I want to nourish people.
We'll be back with more after the break.
Dude, you ran up a mountain today, and I feel like it's like 1,000,000 degrees in Vegas.
Yeah, I did run up a mountain today. And actually, it's slightly less than 1,000,000 degrees today, but it is incredibly hot in the desert. And yeah, I have actually been drinking LMNT on every run. I've been trying to do one run a week and one mountain adventure week, and I always take LMNT in my water. I normally do 2 soft flasks, so 1 liter of water, and I split a pack of LMNT between the liter. And honestly, I think it's for the amount that I'm sweating in the desert, it makes a lot of sense. I think it's a smart way to make sure that I don't bonk.
What flavor did you put in your bottle?
I use any flavor really, but I have been using the lemonade salt this summer. It was a seasonal flavor, though now it's just been made permanent, which is great.
Because it's the best. It's the best one for sure.
Yeah, but honestly, I think it's nice to mix them up, because if you're using the same thing on every run, it starts to feel a little, I don't know. It's just nice to have different flavors. Get a free 8-count sample pack of LMNT's most popular drink mix flavors with any purchase at drinklmnt.com/climbinggold. That's drinklmnt.com/climbinggold. Find your favorite LMNT flavor or share it with a friend.
When you were training in your garage, what is your like go-to jam?
Rock. And any kind of like 2000s rock, metal, punk, whatever.
Like louder the better?
Actually, I forget, one of my friends was describing me as listening to really heavy metal very quietly all the time. Because it's like I don't really want to disturb other people too much, but I do love listening to rock. Like I think like a conscientious metalhead.
So you're like, it's like not louder than 11. You're like, maybe like 4.5. Where are you at?
Yeah, exactly. I turn it up to 3.5, enough so that I can hear it and I can love it, but I'm not bothering anybody else.
You like your music to sound good and crisp. What do you use in the gym?
In my gym here, we're using the Turtlebox Ranger. It's like a little portable Bluetooth speaker.
Like something you could throw in a backpack.
I mean, for Tahoe lifestyle right now, it's amazing. Actually, the babies love carrying it around because it's kind of like big and robust, and you don't worry about it breaking.
Is she into tooled as well?
Well, if there's any luck in this world, then yes, both my children. So far, my children seem to mostly be into Frozen, but I'm working on Tool.
You're not alone in that.
I think I'll also say like it's very easy to connect to my Turtlebox speakers via Bluetooth, and that's like a major pet peeve of mine. And so I think the ease of connection and the ease of use is a big plus for me. Where you're sort of like, oh, literally the first time I took it out of the box, I connected to it easily, and everything just worked seamlessly. Designed for the outdoors, Turtlebox makes durable and portable Bluetooth speakers in a range of sizes, so you can take your music anywhere. Find out more at turtleboxaudio.com. You've been touching on this a bunch while we've been chatting, and I certainly thought about it reading your book, but the balance between intrinsic and extrinsic motivations, because any climber who's being honest with themselves will always admit that there's a balance of both. It's like, I love rock climbing, but I also like when my friends tell me that I'm the man and that I did something that they couldn't do or whatever. In the same way that I was saying that the high altitude mountaineering world just seems bigger, I feel like those dilemmas feel bigger, the intrinsic versus extrinsic, because when you're a guide, it's all work. And so you're being paid for it. It all feels like more conflicted. It's like how much is for you, how much is for others.
Well, yeah, and I talk about it in the book. It's like, for me, in the beginning of my journey, it wasn't enough just to feel the glow of accomplishment of being a climber and getting to the summit. I wanted to be the person leading other people to the summit. I wanted like the built-in clap for me audience, that I was doing a thing that they didn't know how to do, and so they had to like idolize me. Like I wanted that. I just wanted like a really objective position that people would say like that person is like the something, right? Like when you're just rock climbing, like you're just climbing with a bunch of people, and like unless you're Alex Honnold, like nobody gives a fuck who you are, like honestly. And you know this because like you climb with so many, we call them like the quiet crushers that are just
Yeah, the
like
dark horses.
unsponsored.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And we
totally.
talk about it in like the Everest world as well. There's long been this saying, which I do believe is true, which is like the absolute pinnacle of high altitude achievement is to climb Everest without telling anyone. Like if you can do that, like you have made it like that, and no one can, right? And because we're battling this dualicity of wanting the external like accolades. And I think about this a lot and I talk about it a lot. This idea of separating like achievement and accolades, because like achievement really can be for you, and it should be like it should grow you as a person, change your worldview, allow you to push the pause button on your own life, walk a 360-degree circle and learn something. And like accolades do not do that. We can shape where the value is. And so as a guide, I guess that's how I view my role, is to like have this opportunity to shape that the experience is what people are chasing. And that's where like all of the good stuff is. But it's really hard.
And to some extent, I think having the unhealthy childhood helps with achieving that kind of stuff. It's like, because you do work really hard at it. You are trying to prove yourself. And I think that that's an interesting thing to explore, because you're kind of like, well, if you are raised in a totally happy, healthy home life and everything is copacetic, do you wind up pushing as hard as you push to become a great guide, to become a great mountaineer, to become like an athlete in the mountains, basically?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting because I mentored this young girl, and she shows up in the book at the end. She got to spend 5 weeks in Nepal with me. And we had this one night in the tent where we were laying there, and I was telling her something about my childhood that had been, really a challenge I didn't choose, like just the circumstances that I was in. And she had this like very curious sort of wistful look on her face as she was staring out. And she said, in the wisdom of a 12-year-old, as you would, she was like, "Do you think that I can achieve big things because my life has been so easy?" And I like laughed because I was like, "What do you mean? Like you should be able to achieve like far greater things because you have this ease." But then it really opened this question of why do we pursue things, and everybody's answer is different. And also I will say there's a bazillion trap doors of worth wounds that we all have to navigate, even if you have the perfect circumstances around you. Because even I was talking to somebody and I said like I had a relationship with my mother when I was from birth, where I couldn't do anything to be enough. Like there's nothing I could have done to be acceptable. And then I had this father who said, "You can do anything." And the person stopped me and they said, "But what if he had said, you don't have to do anything?" And I was like, oh, like then I don't think I would have had the sort of like achievement wound of thinking I could somehow achieve my way into being enough. But I think that there's a million trapdoors you can fall down in life that, depending on, you don't have to have a really challenging childhood to be able to pursue things. But I don't know if you would expose yourself to the amount of discomfort that...
Yeah, like would you want to? That's the thing. Like with this 12-year-old, it's like the 12-year-old obviously has a way better starting place than you did. It's like, oh, she could be much greater. But will she choose to? Like, will she want to push that hard? Will she have the drive? Will she care? She's going to be a doctor going to Harvard, She's going to be like, whatever, that's fine.
She probably is going to be a doctor, but she's like an incredible athlete and an incredible runner. And she's, now that she's finished a really like illustrious college running career, because that's how long ago that was. She's just graduated college like 2 weeks ago. I know. But she's going to probably break into like competitive trail racing and skimo and just absolutely crush it. And she has this really healthy relationship with competition and sport and achievement. And now I look at her with such envy, right? Like if I had been able to have a healthy relationship with achievement, I would have caused less harm. Let's say that.
What is life without all that turmoil and churn and drama? I mean, your book would be so boring without all the harm you cause.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, exactly. The trail of destruction that you leave behind you is the glory of the book.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, it's a story I don't want to tell, but I'm like, it's a mandatory part of it. And I joke now about it, but it does not feel good to lay awake at night and think about the people that I hurt in pursuit of my own proving it, like I wish I didn't do that. Like I wish I'd had a healthier relationship with what achievement truly meant, but I had to go on that journey. I had to get to this place where my relationship with achievement and challenge could be different. And now, like, I used to run long distances as genuinely as a form of punishment because I like wasn't naturally good at that kind of endurance. Like I deserve to suffer because I am so,
That
not
is
good
so
enough.
dark.
Yeah, it's so dark. It's really dark. But then this evolution started to happen as I began like my own personal healing after I began this journey of like self-acceptance and forgiveness. I now have really good running endurance and I've now made a huge investment in ultra long mountain running because it's a really cool way for me to be able to experience the mountains and challenge myself without the same levels of risk of objective hazard because I don't feel that same fatalistic view, I guess, about my life now that I have not just having a family, but now that I believe that my life
You
is
have something worth living for.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, and that's
totally.
dark too. I mean, there's a dark little section there, but like I really did not care if I died in the mountains. And I wasn't trying to die in the mountains, but I just didn't, I sort of was like ambivalent. I had to go to that really, really dark place to be able to come back out, I think.
Speaking of sort of dark places in the mountains, you have the whole anecdote in your book with the incident with the Sherpas and Simone and John Griffith.
Hmm.
And Uli credited you with saving his life in that whole altercation. Can you talk about that and what impact that had on you personally and I mean what all played out?
Yeah, I mean the situation was so wild and so unbelievable in many ways, but the easiest way for me to explain it is we had, a variety of languages being spoken and a variety of personalities. And if you just imagine like whatever a prototypically Swiss person is in your mind, and then a
Yeah, that
prototypically
is Uli, like
Italian, that is Uli,
prototypically,
like,
and then Simone
right?
Moro really is prototypically Italian,
Yes,
like
yes.
all
Whatever
the
you
things
think
that
of
you imagine.
Italian
Yeah,
as, and then you have Sherpas, which I think we misunderstand largely as the like incredibly complex, nuanced people they are because of so many reasons. But whatever you imagine Sherpas are like you put all of those people, and then of course like hilarious British John Griffith, who's just a side character in this whole situation. There was a massive miscommunication that, if I'm very honest, was like fueled heavily by Simone being
hmm
unable to stop speaking and Uli not being willing to speak. So like some prototypical personality things going on. And it just escalated with, this incredible momentum of a high stakes environment, like group think really took over. And I think a lot of like feelings about for the Sherpa, which I don't want to speak on their behalf, but like I know that there's been a long-standing tension about foreigners coming and taking all of not even just the like income, but like the accolades as well of climbing while they do all the work. Simone and Uli weren't climbing with those Sherpas. They were just the palette on which this like crazy thing got painted. But it just escalated really fast. And then I think like momentum is wild and like just group think takes over and actions start happening faster than synapses are firing. I watched a Sherpa who I knew, and I knew him to be like a rational, kind, gentle person. I watched him pick up a rock and throw it from like 3 feet away from Uli, and it just hit him in the face. And in my brain, I'm like, how is this happening? Like, how is this happening? And I think that those synapses were not connecting. That like that's a rock that could kill somebody. Like that will crush his skull. Skulls are fragile; they will break. And like it feels like we're in a pretend environment where actions don't have consequences. And that's sort of like the baseline of what happened. Was like it was just a brawl at Camp 2 at almost 22,000 feet on Everest in a cold, stormy afternoon with a huge number of people. I don't know what the number of people was, like 70 people totally involved with this. And I just happened to be somebody who knew the Sherpas really well individually and also knew Uli and Simone and Jonathan really well. And I was sort of like able to navigate a space in between the two sides. And I don't know why, like Simone, I know that I'm guessing he has like a strong Italian mama who like tells him what to do because he will listen when I tell him what to do. And that's weird because like he wouldn't listen to anyone else, but he would listen to me and stop. And like I could see this thing with Uli where he was watching something unfold that was unimaginable and I could see it in his face. Like he just didn't know what's going to happen next. And so a lot of it honestly was just like timing of being in that place at that time where I was able to sort of like be in between, communicate with the Sherpas, communicate with Simone, get Simone to stop talking, get the Sherpas to like stop the actions that were happening and de-escalate things. And it formed a relationship for Uli and I that lasted for his whole life. Like we were just really bonded in a way that we'd just gone through something that was really hard, and it was remarkably hard on him. He left that experience on Everest saying, I always have thought that like if I died in the mountains, it would be because of like an error I made, not because somebody killed me.
Yeah.
And like that sounds like sensational to say, but can you imagine being him and dedicating and you are probably one of the very few people who can imagine like facing the type of consequences of your own error causing your death and coming to terms with that on some level, and then being faced with this thing you never imagined. And he was so Swiss in his way of thinking. Like he couldn't be in the military, he said, because like he knew if his job was to like kill people, that's like he would do his job. And he didn't want that life. He didn't want to think that way. And so he made his job like alpinism, and he did that job. And so to have this like threat come from the outside, I think just really rocked him to the core. And that in turn really broke something loose in me as well, because I viewed him like we all in the world did, as like this impenetrable Swiss machine, a machine,
Yeah.
not a person with feelings, not a person capable of deeply hurting. And it changed his world for quite some time, and in turn changed mine.
I mean, how'd that change yours?
I think it started to deconstruct that achievement idea of like achieving my way through the pain I was feeling, and deconstructing the belief that like if I was just good at something, then I would be good enough for myself. And I saw this person who was the best in the world, like
Yeah, who
objectively
is by
speaking.
all accounts good enough. You're like, Uli is by
Yeah.
far the best ever. And you're like, oh, if it's not working for him, then.
No, and him facing like real dark thoughts around his continuing to live and the purpose of being on this planet, and if he wanted to continue to toil. And it shook loose the secret that I was keeping around my own feelings of if I deserved to live this life, if I was doing enough to be worthy of getting to keep living, or if I had caused so much harm that I should, end my own life. And it really culminated in this time for me of being Uli that hurt and that broken allowed me to like honestly look at my own self as well, and start to take some accountability and start to realize that like life is not just what's happening to me, and I can't justify the things I'm doing because of what's happening to me. Like I have some choice here, and I want to make different choices.
I mean, so you just mentioned that for both you and Uli, there's sort of dark thoughts around like, is life worth living? So I just kind of wonder, if you're a high altitude mountain guide, like you're around death all the time, like there are accidents all the time, you think about it a lot. Like what separates your normal day-to-day life and normal experience with death versus unhealthy ideation around, suicide or whatever else?
Partly, and I talk about it in the book, and I think certainly can be something worth noting as a trigger for people who have experienced this, or it's something challenging for them. But, I attempted to commit suicide in high school, and I talk about it in the book, and I talk about like, I had this plan, and I wasn't actually like going to kill myself right then, but I was sort of doing a dress rehearsal. The pain that I was dealing with felt insurmountable. And, I was a teenager. I didn't have a good sense of what the best way to do that was. And so I was sort of like planning this. And in the planning, I almost did kill myself and was able to get out of that situation. And it was both really sad and really scary. And I was sort of like surprised that I felt like I was scared that it was going to happen. And it wasn't that I was scared of death. I was scared that I didn't give myself another chance, like things might change. And if this truly ended right now, that's it. Like they're going to change, but I won't be there to see the change. And I made a choice at that time to make a choice. And that's all I did, was like choose to make a choice. And today that choice is to live. And it then comes back for me. It comes back in this later part of my life where I'm dealing with a lot of this trauma that I had chosen not to look at. And I had to really reconfront this idea of, do I believe I'm worthy of continuing to make this choice? I've achieved a lot in my career, but my personal life and my interior self is just as broken as I can be. And I had this thought, like, if I die right now, no one's going to know until my dog gets hungry and like breaks out of the house to get food, because I'm not close to anyone. No one knows me, and me not showing up somewhere is going to be expected. And so no one's going to miss me. And people will write things on the internet about me, but my funeral chairs will be empty because nobody truly knows me. And that was the beginning of this big shift for me, of realizing I am well known, but I'm not known at all. And I don't want to live my life like that. And that's where I really just started to shift everything and lean into that choice of being alive, but actually like truly showing up in my world and in the world as the real person that I am. I tried to project my own image out to the world and so that I could control what you saw of me. And it was always unsatisfying, like no matter what, whether the feedback was good or bad, like I always was upset about it. And I don't have the same response to what you think of me, like you, the people. And when people are critical of me or my story, it doesn't hit the same way that it used to when I was projecting an image. And that is like this really big surprise to me.
I feel like this is maybe one thing that's always come naturally to me. Basically try to act consistent with your values all the time. Like try to be the person that you're trying to be. And then beyond that, just let all the rest of it go. Like if someone doesn't like it, they can go F themselves. You know, you're like, whatever.
I had to climb Everest 8 years in a row without oxygen to discover that thing that you've always known, Alex. You know how envious I am of you right now?
Yeah, but this is some interesting like nature versus nurture, like parenting stuff, because, you know, I didn't struggle through like any of the real hardship that you had in childhood, but I also had like sort of weird childhood stuff. And I was like deeply insecure as a kid and worried about all that stuff. And for whatever reason, it just all played out like kind of casually. But like certainly with turning a few little dials a tiny bit, I would have been in the same position of you, being like, I'm going to climb all 14 8,000 meter peaks twice, you know, just to learn something that turns out I should have just known. You know,
yeah.
It's like,
yeah. And it's it, right? I've heard it forever of like, it's none of your business what people think of you. And I've always thought of that as this like very lofty ideal, but it's actually true. David Foster Wallace, who I admire his way of thinking so much, he has this great quote that I really feel like embodies all of it, which is like, you won't care what people think of you when you realize how rarely they do. And that's not to say like you're not somebody people think of, but it's like we all are thinking about ourselves all the time. Like, you know, we are wrapped up in, we're the biggest character in our own story, but we're just absolute B characters in everyone else's story. And so, except for your kids right now, right? Because it's like I realize, and it's been this really cool thing and very healing to both realize like how much of my interior self-talk was the voice of an antagonistic parent, right? And I now get to see my daughter talk to herself. I have this little video when she was 2 and she's dragging this like inflatable balance cow up the stairs and she's talking to the cow. And I was walking behind her and I just started filming because it was so cute. And she's like, "You can do this, Kaya. Come on, cow, come up the stairs. Kaya's so strong. Kaya's so brave. You can do this, Kaya." And I was like, her interior voice is my voice to her. And so like I have the opportunity now to like hopefully help her learn this lesson. And, you know, I'm going to botch it in a bazillion ways for sure. All the blind spots I don't know about yet, but I get to do this thing for her that is hopefully avoiding some of that journey that I went on. Like hopefully I went on that journey so that I can help spare her some of that specific pain. She's going to have her own pain, and that's part of this joy of being a human. But I hope I can help her avoid some of that stuff, and that feels very worthwhile to me. When I think about kids, and you know, like as you have little ones now too, I think about like what I want for them. And I always go back to this one thought, which is that I want resilience for my kids. And I have resilience. And I know that resilience isn't born in comfort. And so my job is not to create comfort around my kids. My job is to teach them how to rebound from the natural discomforts that we're going to experience. And I went on a really particular journey of choosing a lot of discomfort and creating more hardship than was necessary. But in that, I got the opportunity to refine how to be resilient. And like my life now feels like the embodiment of what that resilient work is, which is that I can't change the past. I can't change the imperfections of my own behavior. I can't change the things I didn't choose happening, but I can react and sort of rise back up as a better person now. And so that's like the gift that I want to impart forward. And that's part of the work of the book, right? Is to say, I think that we all are flawed in a myriad of ways because that's what being human is. And my book isn't to help you avoid your mistakes. It's just to let you know that like you're going to make mistakes and you're still worthy of really great things.
Thanks, Melissa, for sitting down to chat with us. Melissa's book, Enough: Climbing Towards a True Self on Mount Everest, is available anywhere you get your books. Hey, people ask us if there is a way they can help Climbing Gold, and we love that. One big thing, that's a small thing, is you can write us a review on whatever podcast platform you listen to. I know every podcast asks for this, but it's because every podcast needs that in this day and age. It makes a difference, so if you dig us, leave a review on Spotify or Apple. It helps us keep our place in the charts and allows other people to find the show. Climbing Gold is created by Duct Tape and Beer. Alex Honnold is our host. Our production team includes the talents of Skylar Perwins, Marco Seiler Gonzalez, and Evan Phillips. Our creative director is me, Fitz Cahal. Today's music by David Swenson, Kevin J. Simpson, and Brendan O'Connell. Will Taylor handles our ad sales. Our executive producers are Jonathan Redstick and Ben Endy for RXR Sports, and Lacey Hendricks and Becca Cahal for Duct Tape and Beer. Thanks for listening.